guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Okay, Deepa. Okay, we are live right now. Thanks for listening. Hey, we are broadcasting on multiple channels, so yeah, I'll just call it Anonymous Bite Back again, but we're also broadcasting on the Revolution in the Streets channel. Today we're going to discuss all about the Julian Assange verdict of this morning. As you guys know, the Americans appealed against the previous decision by the judge that said he could not be extradited for medical reasons, and yeah, the Americans still want to extradite him. And yeah, this morning we received the verdict in this case. So I'm kind of still in shock, Deepa, but let's just start about your first observations, like what happened and.
Sure. So yesterday afternoon, late afternoon, at about 3 o'clock UK time, there about sometime around that time, we got a message saying that the judgment would be delivered today. Usually, Stella would have known a few days in advance, but yesterday even she didn't know. So it came as a bit of a surprise to everybody. Yet, I would say there were at least 100 people outside the court this morning. It was hard to mobilize at this short notice. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure I should say 100 because I'm not sure how many of them were press, but it looked like there was a good crowd. It filled the pavement outside. There was the fantastic yellow ribbons for Assange from Truman, the artist. So these were these yellow ribbons that activists were tying with the names of people from all over the world who had sent in good wishes for Assange. And also, like a few of us, a colleague and I, we queued very early this morning, which is why I'm a bit spaced out. So in the early hours, we queued in order to be able to get in because I had been given access by the court to remotely access, but I had requested physical access. I wanted to be in court in case Julian was there, and just also to see how the judges deliver the judgments, to observe the process in terms of people going in and out, and whether we're having access to something called open justice. And, unlike the Old Bailey and Westminster Magistrates Court, they were relatively polite with us when we went in. It's probably the most polite they've been once we actually got in. Craig Murray, who has been in prison and recently come out of Stockton prison, where he himself was a political prisoner, had heard the news last night when we had contacted him. And sorry, I'm just going to mute my phone, which is ringing in the background. And he travelled up on the sleeper train His train was stopped for a couple of hours due to an electric fault. So he thought he might not make it, but he just made it. And somebody had queued from 4, 5 a.m. for him in order for him to get a place. So there's some very good people out there who are very genuine supporters and who recognize the importance of people like Craig being able to witness what's going on. Because if you look at the journalists who were there, of course, Reuters was there, and so were a couple of the big press association type people. But in terms of the big name journalists, I didn't recognize any. I recognized Tim. I'm just trying to remember his last name. Who's the Tim Dawson from the NUJ, the National Union of Journalists in the UK, who has spoken about Assange and spoken for Assange a few times, or rather many times. And I was so tired I didn't register the other journalists in the room, but I couldn't see the kind of big name figures who were there at the trial. So I suspect that many people, because many journalists who got to know at the last moment only joined online. So people like Kevin Gotzola, Mary Kostakidis in Australia, Juan Passarelli, who's been on your show a number of times, Richard Medhurst, and Mohammed El Mazi, who's been there right from the start in terms of covering the case well. And these people were dialing in, and I suspect a number of other legal and political observers who recognized the importance of this case were also dialing in. Sorry, that's too much. I'm rambling, Mark, so please cut me off if I'm giving too much detail. But what I was trying to say was that there was some press in the room. When we came in, we were told that after a little while that the lawyers wouldn't be there, so we were a bit surprised. Julian's lawyers did turn up. So, but then the judge, of the two judges, there were two judges at the previous stage of the hearing. So for those of you who've never heard the Assange hearings before, at the last, when the US made its appeal against the first decision of the lower court judge not to extradite Assange, there were two judges present in court. Lord Justice Burnett, who's the senior most judge in the UK, and Justice Holroyd. Only Holroyd was present today. The other one didn't turn up. I don't know for what reason, they didn't explain. And so that's the scene setting. Do you want to ask me a question, or shall I just continue to explain what actually happened in the court? Or have I gone on for too long?
No, you should start from the beginning, because we have listeners who might not know so much about this yet. Because we're broadcasting onto our channel as well.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so for those of you who've never heard about the Assange case, it is a very important case for press freedom, because Julian Assange, who's the founder of WikiLeaks, which is a channel by which whistleblowers communicate their leaks securely to journalists, has been persecuted by the Americans and their allies for revealing true information about serious war crimes in Iraq, Afghanistan, torture in places like Guantanamo Bay. These are the three reasons within the US request to extradite him to the US. And he's not a US journalist. He didn't undertake journalistic activity in the US. And yet they want to try him under US espionage laws, that's like spying laws, in saying that what he did in providing this information free of charge to the public, 100% accurate information, which continues to be accurate to this day, they are suggesting that is spying and espionage. And for those of you who, obviously if you're on an anonymous channel, you're probably somebody who is very good at IT and technology and understands these things, which I don't. But Julian was the first person to devise this platform, WikiLeaks, which allowed for the first secure Dropbox for whistleblowers. So essentially, not only could whistleblowers themselves be anonymous, but also, in addition to their security, there was security of the documentation that was being provided to journalists. And in terms of contact with journalists, Julian was very far-sighted, and there were two levels of journalists that your information went to. Because of the expertise in WikiLeaks, for example, if you were somebody like Chelsea Manning, the American Army whistleblower, she could give you huge dumps of data which showed serious war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. And these, of course, would be of interest to places like the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Guardian, etc., etc. And so WikiLeaks had relationships with these media organizations, the big ones. But also if you were, say, somebody who was giving leaks about Tunisia, corruption in Kenya, toxic waste dumping on the Ivory Coast, etc., WikiLeaks could put you in touch with journalists who were working in your country. Without them, without either party's security being compromised, and with enough expertise within the WikiLeaks team to be able to ensure that the data that they were giving was accurate, which meant that for the first time, journalists, if you're a whistleblower and you tell something to a journalist, only that journalist gets the information, and then that journalist tends to edit it, put it out in a way they think is important. There was no history of archival or putting this data in the public domain, or for ordinary people to look at it and see what it means. And so, for example, if I'm an expert in something, I can now look at the data which was provided 20 years ago. Say if I'm an expert on war crimes in a particular part, I can go back and look at it. And this idea of archival was also new to WikiLeaks. And of course, the scientific method, the idea that somebody else can robustly check what you say, which means that if I'm a biased journalist or a journalist who only sees one angle, I can't, the whistleblower is not reliant on me to tell the truth. Other people can look at it. And not only that, having this volume of data and then being able to tie it in with declassified data, which appears maybe 30 years, 50 years later, allows you to get a bigger, richer picture of what actually happened. So what Julian did was revolutionary, especially because this was the age where we had print newspapers and a small number of powerful journalists and also a small number of media owners, just like today. And these media owners obviously like a range of discourse which is acceptable to them, whereas WikiLeaks democratized journalism. It helped for us as individuals, as members of the public, to surveil the state instead of the state constantly surveilling us. And WikiLeaks made some phenomenal, disclosures of information. And what was powerful about WikiLeaks was even when the US State Department, etc., tried to shut them down, told them, don't take this data down or take that down, they didn't back off. And they're such a tiny organization compared to, say, the New York Times or the Guardian or somebody else. And all those organizations were very willing to be scared, or were very willing to send in embedded reporters who sat within the army side and therefore only reported one side of the battle. Whereas with WikiLeaks now you had lots of different eyes on issues, and this really changed journalism. So Julian was revolutionary, somebody who inspired everybody, somebody who was able to marry technological skill with subject matter knowledge, and also with journalistic integrity, so to speak. But this was amazing. He worked with people like people who worked at the Iraq body count, with people like Daniel Ellsberg. And for the last 10 years, Julian has been in some form of detention or another. Initially, he had sought asylum at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and he spent almost 7 years there. And then for the last 2.5 years, he has been locked up in Britain's most horrific prison. It's called Belmarsh. It is known widely as the Guantanamo of Britain, not because of necessarily of the torture which is prevalent, of course, all British prisons in some way or another. But in terms of the kinds of prisoners who go there, so the real big terrorists, criminals, etc., house snipers and mass murderers, and so Julian, who's this kind, peace-loving, highly intelligent man, has been locked up. In the first 3 months that he was there, they lost his reading glasses, so he couldn't even read. Both in his time at the Ecuadorian embassy and subsequently, the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention has ruled that Julian is being arbitrarily detained. The UK has done some horrible things. For example, when Julian had a broken tooth while he was in the embassy, they wouldn't let him out of the embassy to have medical treatment. Similarly, when he had a serious shoulder injury, while he's been at Belmarsh, they've treated him really appallingly. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Professor Niels Melzer, has found and conveyed to Sweden, Ecuador and Britain the kind of violations that he says constitute torture. For example, being locked in somewhere 22 hours a day, not having access to contact, being smeared, being isolated, and to take a revolutionary journalist and on International Human Rights Day to then do a judgment which says that, yes, okay, we remove the barriers to extraditing you to the US, where in the US you will serve 175 years in a supermax prison, where you will be in a 10 by 12 by 8 cell, where you will be locked up alone 22 hours of the day, pre-trial, not even after you have been convicted, but before you're convicted. You will be tried under the Espionage Act as a spy, with no public interest defense, without protection of the First Amendment because you're a non-US citizen, and you will be given your food once a day through a hatch and maybe put under even more restrictive isolation measures called special administrative measures. The US excels at these terms. But these special administrative measures mean you can speak to your family twice a month for 15 minutes only, with supervision from the FBI, real-time supervision.
Yeah, you have to
over the
also notify them 14 days before you make the call so they can prepare for it and they will listen to everything you do. Yeah, and to make it like very clear to listeners, we're talking about a journalist, right? An innocent man, not a criminal. Right now, still locked up in between rapists and murderers, like actual criminals, facing essentially life in prison in the United States, in where he will be put away in like horrible conditions, right? Like you're saying, isolation and not allowed to be even in touch in private with family or whatever. And I remember you telling me also, like on a previous broadcast we did, that they actually they were talking about like, oh well, he will be allowed entertainment and and that pretty much meant that he would be allowed to go to the cell, an empty cell next to his own cell, where he could like move around a bit.
Essentially, and they call it individual recreation. He will be allowed individual recreation. What does that mean? You won't see another human being. You will just be in an empty cell that looks exactly like yours and be allowed to recreate. I mean, the nonsense that comes out of the US supposedly justice system is horrendous. And, for those of you who don't know, it's very sad thing is that Julian has said he will commit suicide if he is extradited to the US. He doesn't want to experience that entombment, as they say in the US. And so his mental health has really deteriorated because of the ongoing torture for over a decade. And he has a previous history of depression and osteoporosis. His health is so fragile that he cracked a rib while trying to tie a shoelace. So this is not a man who should be in prison for either health grounds or other grounds. What's also very interesting is that the US-UK Extradition Act includes a clause that specifically says that politically motivated prosecutions cannot be used, the act cannot be used for extraditions for those. And anybody who knows about espionage knows that it's a political offense. So even if suggestion that this is espionage, which is a nonsense, is true. It should be exempt from the act, and yet, at every stage of the court process, we have seen absolutely no respect for basic principles of law. So one of the things that you will see in this case is that the prosecuting country, that is the US, actually spied on him, not just on him while he was in a sovereign embassy of Ecuador, but also on his legal conversations. So what is the chance of somebody getting a fair trial if the other party can hear all the conversations you have with your lawyers? Not only did they spy on him, the CIA, Yahoo News has confirmed this, the CIA made plans to kill him. So again, it's just bizarre. And thirdly, the main FBI witness in this case, Sigurdur Ingi Thurdarson, who's an Icelandic convicted paedophile and fraudster, multi-time fraudster, also recanted his testimony, saying that the FBI had said they would give him immunity if he made up a story about Assange, and he made up that story, and it was all lies. So this entire indictment, which the US has given, is based on a pack of lies. So that's the story so far. And if I can, I might, Mark, if I can work out how to do this, there is a thread that I posted today on Twitter, which includes at least, it's only about 8 or 9 tweets. I know that's long in itself, but if people who've never heard about the case want to know some of the basics about why Julian shouldn't be prosecuted, it's in that thread. Can I put it on a chat or something to you, if that's okay?
If you copy paste it in the Discord thing, I'll drop it in the YouTube chat.
That will be under general or show?
Yeah. You can do it in both, doesn't matter.
Okay, thanks.
I'll catch it. Yeah, so one of the most horrible things is actually also like this is I'm sure this is not a coincidence, right? Today it is Human Rights Day. Like, we're supposed to celebrate our human rights and speak out for all our different rights, which includes press freedom, which includes freedom of speech, which includes the freedom to educate ourselves, right? We have these rights, and the fact they're doing this today, on this day, and it seems on purpose. It's just to give us a message that they're letting us know how they feel about that, I guess. Did you drop it in the thing? No, take your time. It's okay.
I'm crap at this. I'm just trying to do it while looking. I thought I used to think a long time ago. I used to think I was reasonably good at doing basic IT. No.
Well, you have to be tired. I mean, I saw you this morning. I think you were the first ones there. Like,
we were.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. Like, that you're even able to stay awake right now. Like I said, you guys are heroes for standing up for him like this, and I'm actually happy that Reuters was there too, because a big thing, a big part of this trial, right, and a big reason why the Americans are so obsessed with him is because of the collateral murder video. That wasn't just the information, because information is it's not everyone is just going to read these huge documents with all these files. Specialists will, people who are really like researching this will, but the normal people who are just like randomly browsing on whatever, like YouTube or something, they can see the collateral murder video. And the collateral murder video shows soldiers shooting at civilians in Iraq. Yeah. And they're shooting at civilians, innocent civilians, from a helicopter and they're killing a lot of people, including 2 Reuters journalists.
Yeah,
And
and also 2 children.
yeah,
They attacked and harmed 2 children, and it's interesting that it's not like it was a mistake. The U.S. initially told the Reuters Baghdad bureau chief, Dean Yates, that, oh, your journalist was carrying a camera that looks like a telephoto lens and therefore looks like a rocket launcher. So, you know, it's because of that that these guys were hit. But when the collateral murder video came out, it became clear that this was an intentional hit at civilians. And not only was it an intentional hit at civilians, these people in this gunship see the children and they say, oh, well, it's their fault for bringing their children in this war zone. Da, 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 da. And it's like some kind of crazy video game. And these guys in the air having fun, chatting. And it's just mindless violence. And it's not the only time it happened. There are other incidents, one of which actually was stolen from Julian Assange, the recording of which was stolen from Julian Assange when he was on a flight. And that recording showed, I believe, 90 villagers being killed. And so there are lots of these examples of intentional murder, intentional torture. For example, in Guantanamo, where Ahmed Rabani, for example, is one of the people who was detained there, and he was picked up off the streets when he was, I think, 19 or 20, some very young age. He was a taxi driver, and he's been in Guantanamo for 20 years. And after the first few years, they realized that he had been taken sorry, I have a child crying. Rod! Sorry, I didn't realize I was not on mute. Beg your pardon.
it's
They heard
okay.
me shouting. One of the kids is crying. One of the kids is crying. And this man was tortured, but they realized it was a case of mistaken identity because they brought the actual terrorist also to Guantanamo. But the terrorist was released, but this guy was not released because, well, it seems that the US doesn't want to acknowledge that it has committed a crime against him. So he's sitting there still to this day, and he's waiting to be released. And it's just horrendous. And there are lots of such stories, you know. For example, one such individual was waterboarded 83 times. And we would never have known about all of this were it not for what Chelsea Manning did in leaking those files, and were it not for the WikiLeaks releases.
Exactly. And yeah, what people should realize is that this was a platform, or is a platform, because it's still there. It's a platform for everyone, right? And that means that, like you mentioned earlier on too, that there is a security wrap system which uses .onion, the Tor network, and where you can safely drop files as a whistleblower, as a leaker, that you just want published. If you are a witness to whatever crimes in your organization or in your government or whatever, and you can safely get it published by WikiLeaks. And that means that except for just validating files, checking if they are legitimate, and that Julian and also the other journalists working there are not like people who make their own opinions. That they don't influence files with their own opinions. They just publish the files and raw data and actual information. They are doing their journalistic job, and it is actually something every good journalist should do, because what we're used to these days are all these opinionated articles in the mainstream media where they are trying to push us in some kind of direction. That's what we often see. And but WikiLeaks is truly a platform for the people, right? And it was also still is very powerful, because it was disseminated the information by normal people and also connected to other platforms, other media. But also this was something we all had together as as freedom of information activists, and the way they are treating Assange right now is it's just a message to all of us. It's a message to all press freedom, and to what this it is showing what they can do to an innocent journalist, right? They know this is not a criminal. They know we know this is not a criminal, and they are showing to us what they can do to an innocent man, and it is a threat to us. It is showing like we can do this to you, right? And that is why actually we need to show that we don't allow this to happen too. That's and right now we're doing this in a peaceful ways, right? And but we have to increase the size of these protests still. Even right now, I mean, if I'm correct, it's going to the Secretary of State now, right? He has to make like the final decision.
No, so well, ish. It
Technically,
goes back to the lower court, to the magistrate's court, where it was originally decided. And the magistrate has to do a process which takes it to the Secretary of State. Alongside, there are two levels of appeals that will be going on. Firstly, appeals in relation to what was discussed today, because that has never been discussed previously, in relation to the United States assurances as to how they will treat Assange when he's in the US. Those were not previously discussed, even in the September hearings, etc. And the sorry, losing my train of thought. And the other thing that will be discussed is something called a cross appeal. So there was a judgment from the lower court, and that lower court judgment decided not to extradite Assange. The US appealed that judgment based on five grounds, and two of those grounds were upheld. But many of the things in that judgment were things that were dangerous to journalism and dangerous to Assange. And Assange's lawyers have not had an opportunity to appeal that yet. So what will also happen will be an appeal against that lower court judgment. So there will be various fights going on. This will end up both at the Supreme Court and the European Court of Human Rights. So there is a long process ahead. In all of this, they are trying to murder Julian in various ways, but the most important bit of the murder is this killing by process, death by 1,000 cuts, where every day his health, his both physical and mental, is being eroded. And you can all imagine how bad the UK prisons are, and of course US prisons are equally bad. But in the UK prisons right now, most prisoners, even if you're a remand prisoner, that is, you haven't been convicted for any crime, are in their cells up to 23 hours a day, because there is a problem with staffing, but also they are using COVID as an excuse for this. And so people are just so alone, and many of you have been at home for days on end during the COVID lockdowns, and after a while how this takes away your spirit, how not meeting other people can really grind you, not being able to have any autonomy, any control over your life, and having to eat the same prison food, live in cells where there might be rats, there might be cockroaches, you will not get heating some days. Last year, for almost 8 weeks, no more than that actually, Julian, in the middle of a cold winter where the temperatures were below zero, had zero heating because there was a breakdown in the heating system, and they hadn't given him his cold weather clothes from the storage. And the reason they gave for not giving his cold weather clothes, and this is all part of the psychological torture, is that he had to fill in a paper form, to get the clothes. But you can't fill in that paper form because of COVID, they were not giving paper forms. So it was just a crazy kind of nonsense that has gone on in the case in terms of trying to beat him down at every point, where for other people, certain things are allowed. For him, in the process, those things are never allowed, and it's a horrendous process, horrendous to watch. He's got two very young children, one of whom has never seen him other than in prison, and the other of whom has never seen him other than in incarceration. He's got a woman he's about to marry, and it's elderly parents, very elderly parents. So it is horrible. It is absolutely horrible.
It is. It is. And so, like you're saying, this is going to be like a super long process because it's going to be moved around now, and effectively, if it ends up at the European Union Human Rights Court, well, I honestly say that European Union cases can take like 2.5 to like 4.5 years.
So this is out. It's not necessarily the European Union. This is under the European Convention, I believe.
Yeah, that is
And
a few more countries signed up to that, including the UK, even Russia signed that. But I do know these cases can take a very long time with these courts. Um,
yeah,
and,
cases can take a long time, and it's not. It's when your body has suffered 10 years of torture. You don't know when any of the internal organs will give way. And, he has experienced quite a lot of constant harm, and we don't know if he will survive, and also if he will suicide, because one of the things that was disclosed, and I apologize for bringing this up, is that he has attempted to take his own life while in Belmarsh.
yeah, okay, and we can't safely mention it because it's been published before too. I mean, they found like a razor blade and stuff hidden. They know he contacted like a Catholic priest for like
Yeah,
yeah.
I used the word he has attempted to take his own life. Rather, I should have used the word he has contemplated attempting
Yeah.
to take his own life. That should have been the correct wording. I apologize. I'm really tired and I
Yeah,
misspoke.
but this is not even this is not a strange thing in the situation. When this all happened, he was I think 38 or 39. He just turned 50 in jail. While being locked up, he turned 50, and he was 38, 39 when he first got into trouble over these publications. This is 2010, 2011. So. And he's pretty much locked up ever since. First in the embassy and now in this horrible high security prison in between the worst of the worst criminals. Well, he's not a criminal. He's an innocent man there. And for this guy to like lose the best years of his life in locked up and doing that for just to deliver us the truth. I mean, for people to allow this to happen in front of us is this is the most horrible thing ever. Like seriously. This is like a public crucifixion.
It is, and what is sad is that a lot of people in prison, whether in Britain or in other parts of the world, are in prison not because they are bad people, but because they have, from childhood especially, they have experienced serious institutionalization and exposure to drugs and have not received the psychological and physical support that they need and educational support that they need to be able to do the best with their lives, and it is not their fault. And in fact, I mean, they are not the real criminals. The real criminals are Bush and Blair, who are in having wonderful lives, going to Christmas parties, congratulating the Barack Obama, who's sanctioned vast numbers of drone killings, and are living a good life while killing really poor, really vulnerable people in all other parts of the world, and then pretending to be great. These are the criminals. These are the war criminals. These are the murderers. These are the people we should be going after in terms of holding them to account. And that's not happening. Instead, the people who tell the truth, whether it is Daniel Hale, the drone whistleblower who is locked up in the US, or Julian Assange, these are the people who are getting hurt. And that's wrong. That's seriously wrong.
Yeah, and so we have some people in the chat, and I was just discussing a bit, like while you were talking, with the fact that um, there are so many people who are doubting what we are hearing right now about the whole lockdowns and the human rights issues. There is everything justified? Are we getting the true information? What are all these governments doing? Are they planning like more? Are they using like a virus to create more authoritarianism, etc.? Well, whatever is true, the fact is that he is being used to scare all other journalists into submission, right? Uh, and in the chat also people are saying like, yeah, we need to be courageous. He's being pilloried as an example to scare other journalists. And they're also saying like, if he did suicide, I would not necessarily believe it. So this is the thing, and I'm not sure. How would you say that we could even stand a chance into stopping this? We need to, obviously we need to stop him from being extradited, right, to the USA. I mean, he's not going to ever leave that country ever in his life again.
Yeah, I mean, it, the US assurances, for example, are one that they won't put him under special administrative measures unless he does something once they go there. And this idea of he does something, we assume that it is actually doing some new act. But this could be as simple as him potentially talking to other prisoners, or them being concerned that he might have some information that he might disclose. So these assurances, are not worth the paper they're written on. But coming back to what can we do, I think the first and most important thing to say is, if it's a 12-year case and a court case using a lot of legal language, most people do not understand it. And most people end up having a discussion about the character of Assange. Is he likable? Is he going to suicide? Is he being tortured, etc., etc.? But we should be talking about, what is it that Assange did in terms of what did he reveal? Who are the criminals? And the more we talk about the criminals and the people who undermined the process for him, this false prosecution that he's being put through, the more we reveal the criminality of that, as for example in the UK, declassified UK are doing, and journalists like in the US, like number of journalists, Max Blumenthal and his people at the Grey Zone, and these journalists are revealing the realities. There's a fantastic Icelandic journalist called Bjartmar Alexandersson who's revealed the true story of the FBI witness and his lies. And this information, the more such information comes into the public domain, firstly, we will have information for people to understand that this is a stitch up, because a lot of people were distracted by all kinds of questions about, does he wipe feces on the wall? Does he hurt his cat? All these lies that they plant, the intelligence plants on the media. But also, very importantly, people then start to not realize how important the case is to their causes. So it's very important to link it back to, if your parents were being treated badly in a care home, if your child was being treated badly in a hospital, if your local school was being closed, if there is corruption in your community, if there is toxic waste dumping near you, if there is a nuclear plant coming up, if there is a disease coming up. Why is it that places like WikiLeaks are important? Because the people who really understand what's going on behind the scenes can tell us. And to encourage people to recognize that, that's another important thing you can do. And we need to have lots of local communities putting pressure, firstly on their local journalists unions and press freedom groups and human rights groups, many of whom, they're willing to take our money, but they don't actually want to do the real work of standing up to power. And so we need to keep them to account, but also need to get more people visibly supporting Julian, because governments are fickle. They come up for elections. They don't want to be the bad guys. If we can push them to do the right thing, then that's a big step forward. And you don't need to be a great expert in the law to do this. But even if you talk to your family, your friends, um, understand various parts of the case, maybe make a placard, maybe arrange a local gathering, maybe arrange a screening of a film about Assange. There are 2 or 3 very good short documentaries that are available. Share it in your language, invite the filmmaker to come and speak. We've just arranged a huge, not we, but Victor, Dedaj, and other colleagues have arranged a fantastic series that took place in Paris, and it's now spreading all over France. If you're in America, do the same. Some colleagues have, from the grassroots support campaign, I'm not part of it, but they have organized billboards in their local town showing what's going on. These kinds of things focus public attention on this injustice. And people have to realize that it's about democracy and about our rights to hold our governments to account for the crimes that they commit in our name. And so it's very important that you guys are the ones, you guys and girls are the ones who have the intellectual power to create online tools, to share information, to get the message out there, to beat the algorithms. And it would be really useful to have your solidarity, as you have done over the years. And many of you have put yourselves at risk to do the right thing, and it's really important that you continue to stand up for what's right in a way that is safe for you, and of course legal. And I will not ever suggest that you should do anything beyond the law, but if we have to make sure that the people who are defining the law aren't the criminals, and that's 99% of the time that is what is happening, so we need to reveal their criminality. So I guess that's a very long-winded answer to your question, Mark. This is what happens when I'm tired, sorry.
No, it's fine, it's fine. I'm glad you're explaining it so well for everyone. Yeah, I know, like, we can't say, like, do all these illegal things or whatever, because, yeah, the channel will just get banned or whatever, and, yeah, we will be the new terrorists. But, yeah, no, I can honestly say I'm not going to stop anyone either. It's like, yeah. The thing is, at some point, like,
well, I don't think it's just because it's because the channel will be banned. Because for me, I come from a very different world to.
Yeah, no, I'm only going to speak for myself. I'm not going to. Like, you make it very clear that you're not advising to do anything illegal. Like, but I can only say, like, we are dealing with actual war criminals, right? Like, we're talking about the journalists who exposed actual war crimes. Like, back then it was Blair, it was Bush. It eventually resulted in the murder of anywhere between 180,000 and about 1 million civilians in Iraq. Not just by the American army or whatever, but also, like, the whole outcome out of that. ISIS taking over, Americans leaving weapons there, the entire region destabilized, and then there is a lot of horrible stuff coming out of there. Iraq, Afghanistan too. That has also been published on WikiLeaks. We have other whistleblowers like Dave McBride, etc. We have the other drone whistleblower. Like, they make very clear that a lot of soldiers have been committing crimes there. The protocols were not listened to. They were shooting at civilians and often just asking questions later: were they actually a danger to us, or yeah? So this is a horrible. There are so many horrible things happened there and are still going on there that you're, like, saying, like, is it really still a crime when you start exposing these things in whatever way possible without actually, like, harming anyone, but just, like, to expose the facts about what is going on around us? Like, like, it's not equally judged upon. Like, when you do something like you expose files in an illegal way, you hack into, like, whatever You work in the military and you hack into like your local computer in the military, because you get so enraged by what you see happening around you, and you publish these files to whatever platform. Yeah, it's a crime. But when you're talking about people murdering all these civilians, like you always have to ask the question, like, is it actually is it legally a crime, or is it morally a crime? Like, aren't you morally obliged to do something about it? Like, I think these are very important questions to ask. Like, why aren't we holding these people accountable? These actual war criminals. Why aren't they in prison? It's fine. Put the hacker in prison or whatever. Put the leaker in prison. But why aren't these people in prison? They should be facing life in prison. Not this journalist who exposed this, and he didn't hack anything himself either. He just received files and published on WikiLeaks. He didn't do anything criminal. And whatever way these files are delivered to them, they are not checking on that. They are just providing a secure drop. Anyone can provide files there. They're not asking you questions. How did you get these files? They're checking if these files are legitimate or not, and publishing the truth. And that's what a journalist should do. Yeah.
Mar, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to have to go now. Um, but I'm happy to take any final questions if you have one or two, and then I'm
let's
going to
see.
shut down.
Let me see. I did have a personal question about it, but I think it might be really far-fetched to actually suggest that. Let me see. People say stop playing their game, etc. Okay, so I had a question because, okay, this is relevant for my own country, right? We have a royal family in my own country. When people get married, right, they can actually, sometimes when someone gets arrested and put away for like a year or something in prison, they get married while the guy is in prison or something, and they send a letter to the Queen asking for a pardon. Has it ever been attempted? This is my personal question.
Yeah. Funnily enough, this is what one of the things in the US-UK extradition treaty is that political extradition is not allowed. Anyway, a few years ago, some people got together and wrote to the Queen saying, "Could you intervene to do the right thing in this case?" And she replied saying she's been advised by Her Majesty's government that this is a political matter with the US, and therefore the Queen should not interfere. So on the one hand, they advised her and she talks to them and whatever, and she gets, well, presumably not them directly advising, but her advisors tell her, no, the Queen shouldn't intervene in these things, this is a political matter. And yet on the other hand, of course, the Queen and Prince Andrew and the other people are all always hand in glove, meeting all these murderous dictators and helping to grease the wheels for selling them lots of weapons and whatever else. And that's not political, of course. But Assange's case is political. And and so she won't intervene. She's declined to intervene.
You know why I'm asking it, right? Because you just mentioned Prince Andrew. So I think like, there is a lot of pressure going on with this whole Maxwell case right now. And
Prince Jeffrey Epstein spent some time at the Queen's Balmoral cottage. Sorry, I've got a child crying again. Just hang on a second, I'll be back.
Take your time, yeah. Yeah, so for listeners, I was mentioning it because, Prince Andrew and also the British royal family are mentioned in the whole Epstein trial, and it would actually be a very smart PR move from that side if they would, try to clean their sheet a bit by actually pardoning a legitimate, innocent journalist who isn't a criminal. Yeah, so it was pretty. I was explaining it like it would actually be a smart PR move, just saying, from the royal family. Yeah. Because he's an innocent journalist.
They only help out criminals. They don't help out journalists.
Yeah, this is weird, right? They do help out the criminals. They don't help out the journalists. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So for now we have this.
And
Is there? Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, you had a question which you mentioned that you were going to ask earlier before the show, and I can't remember what it was. And I said I'll answer it. I'll be happy to answer it. I'm trying to remember. It was just before the show started. You said you had a question, and then we were going to start, so we said we'll talk about it here. It hasn't rung any bells anyway. You remember what it was that you wanted to ask?
We started about Craig Murray. I was actually happy that Craig Murray was covering it, and then I mentioned about the fact that Reuters was there.
No, this was before the show started. You asked me a question, and I said I will answer it in the show. But anyway, best not bore everybody with this conversation. Maybe next time I can answer it.
Yeah, we'll get plenty of chances, I think. Sadly enough, on this case, we'll get more chances to do that.
So in that case,
so what happens now?
sorry,
What
go
is it? Just a last question. What happens now? What is the time frame now? What is going to happen next, and when do we expect it?
it's not clear what the time frame is. It's not clear when there is a 14-day time frame by which they have to put in this appeal to the Supreme Court in relation to the US assurances. There is also a broader timescale in relation to what they call the cross appeal, which is Julian's lawyers appealing the lower court judgment, and they've already put in the first grounds for that, and then they will put a more detailed submission in due course. So I cannot see an end in sight right now. But if they want to extradite him out of the country quickly, they might find court slots to be able to hear the thing and then give some kind of dodgy verdict, I guess.
Yeah, what always surprised me in this situation is that he's being kept in that little cell and there. I always considered, like, why aren't they just bringing him into house arrest or something? Like, at this point, like, why aren't you just doing it? Why aren't you just making it a little easier for him in that sense? Put him
Well, they don't want to make it easy. They want to break him down, but also now he's in a situation where there is a removal of the bar against extradition. So they will say, well, when he sought asylum, they treat that as bail jumping. So he's jumped bail once. They don't want to run a risk that he will run away again. And of course, this man, technology has not changed in the last 20 years in terms of ankle tags and more sophisticated monitoring of people being able. No. They don't take account of all of that. They just think he's a bad man who jumped bail. They don't recognize that while one of the reasons he sought asylum was because his life was under threat. No, let's ignore that. And they continue.
Ignore the fact that they can find a mouse in the jungle, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's like there's absolutely no way he would be able to hide at this point.
Yeah. So, in terms of next stages, that's what's going to happen, and I think more than anything else now, we need to put pressure on MPs, on the unions of journalists and the press freedom organizations to not just talk the talk, but actually do something. Not just do a Zoom call or just put out one article or whatever, but actually take concrete actions.
Every single day. There have to be protests actually every single day.
Yeah.
Whatever way.
One of the things that somebody...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things that somebody suggested to me today was a boycott of all American-made goods while Julian Assange is still in prison. Now, of course, there are greater reasons to boycott such goods because of the number of wars that America has been involved in, etc., etc. But, people, there are always pros and cons of this when you talk about whatever apartheid state you're going to talk about where we've done boycotts, is that we've thought, okay, well, we will boycott X state because they are engaging in apartheid behavior, but then ordinary people there are hit by these boycotts, etc., etc. So I'm not really sure how that would work, but People are thinking of all kinds of suggestions because they're so angry that ordinary people's voices are not being heard. So ordinary people are coming up with very, very concrete suggestions of the things they're going to do.
Well, you could make a boycott broader. Like you could say, like, we will boycott American products until these American war criminals are put into court. And in that court, obviously, the evidence provided by WikiLeaks can be used against them.
Yeah, that's for me, that's a long step away.
Yeah.
But yes, we have to do these things if we have to get to do the right to get justice. But in the immediate future, it's not clear to me what the particular strategy will be other than mobilizing lots of public support and lots of people. You can do simple things like phoning into your local radio station and saying, I'm here to, I dedicate a song to Assange, or I support WikiLeaks because of this. Do you know that this is happening? And lots of people call in on lots of different things. You can do that. You can call into your television station where you have you can wear a badge so that people ask you about the case and you can talk to them about it. There's lots of simple things that lots of people can do. And you guys are so creative. Maybe you can create something online, some kind of as basic as a tweet storm to something much more complex online that will allow people to talk to each other about these kinds of issues. And I mean, things are getting very authoritarian and fascist in the UK, where debate is just being completely silenced. They've now last week introduced a bill that allows them to take away citizenship from people like me without even giving us notice because we are first generation immigrants. And it's becoming a very scary, horrible world, and we need people like Julian to be there and to be safe, for us to understand how to cope with the serious climate crisis we are facing, to understand how to cope with various other problems that society is facing, of hunger, of poverty. And we need intelligent people like him around. So we are doing this for ourselves as much as we are doing it for Julian.
You're completely right. I should let you go to bed.
I think I should. I'm slowly shutting down, and as you can see, big black circles around my eyes. So I thank you for inviting me. It's always nice to come and speak to the Anons because I feel they're cool talking to all you people whom I don't really know anywhere. But it's nice to see you. But I hope I've given you some food for thought, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for being here. Yeah, well, we met once in London.
Yes, I have met you, and I'm glad to know you. Very glad. Thanks.
Yeah, well, we'll do more later, and thanks so much for being with us. I put in the chat how people can find you on Twitter, and if you guys missed it, scroll a bit up in the chat, or I'll just post the link again and just follow her on Twitter.
Super, that'd be really nice actually, because I think I don't know, but I think sometimes it's useful to have new people amplify things because otherwise it becomes the same kind of conversation again and again, and it's nice to meet new people as well. I don't know how to use your chat yet, but I will work it out. I don't know whether it's under general or show. But
I use 3 YouTube chats at once. Just saying.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, fine. Cool. Nice to see you again, Mark. Bye.
Good night. Have a good rest.
Night.
If you guys are listening to this still, please help share this around. That's what we depend on. We don't make any money doing these podcasts, and you guys probably understand that much of this stuff is being shadow banned and heavily censored. Right now, not so much, but the second they discover it, it becomes censored. We're very used to this. It doesn't really matter, but we do need you guys to help out with sharing this. And just to repeat it one more time, like the Julian Assange case, it is not just about him, right? It is about all of us, and it is about press freedom. And as long as an innocent journalist is jailed, being publicly, psychologically tortured, some would argue this also has physical effects, so he is just being tortured, right? He's being smeared. WikiLeaks is being attacked constantly. He is. If we don't stop this, he's not going to see the light of day again, ever. And that gives such a powerful and scary message to other journalists that if you are worried that you are not getting the full truth about other things, and you guys know what I'm talking about, this is one of the reasons. Other journalists are scared into submission, and they are not going to report the truth as long as they know that because he is innocent, they can do this to him. They can do the exact same to them. And that's why these people in power are dragging this out forever and ever, for as long as they need to do it to accomplish their goals. And we need to make sure that all eyes are put on this constantly, and that is why on this channel, but also on the other channels, we covered the Julian Assange trial a lot. And it's not because of we are like obsessed or fans of this one person. It's because this is the crucial canary in the coal mine, right? This is what they're doing. It's setting an example, and if we win this, if we stop this, we are freeing all these other journalists. And some are standing up already, so they're not all scared. Especially like the older journalists, more experienced ones, they're standing up for him already. And shortly before this whole appeal trial thing started, a few months ago, actually in the Times there was this article, and it was posted by this union of journalists, and it represented I think a few 100,000 journalists, and they all spoke out in defense for Assange. And that should show a clear message that the press wants this to stop, and we need him to be free. And like as Deepa said, you can actually make a difference. You just make a huge noise. That's what you need to do, because they're looking to make him disappear in that sense. They're locking him away, smearing whatever he did, smearing his name, making his legacy disappear, right? Making their own little story out of who he is and what he did, what WikiLeaks is, and they are manipulating our history, right? They are future generations will not know what happened if they get their way. So you have to put all eyes on this, and you can actually, because we are like with a lot of people, and we're broadcasting this on 3 different channels. These channels together have like over 35,000 subscribers. I know that. I think even more with all these channels. That's a lot of people. You can put your eyes on all the eyes on this. So please do it. And thanks for listening.